How's it going, everyone? Welcome to episode 1 of Fight Game Chronicles. I am your host, James Lynch, joined by my co-host, Kevin Froggy Mabanga, here on the program, man. How's it going? I'm excited to start this episode 1 here.
Man, it's been a very good week. A lot of exciting fights, a lot of exciting action, and I'm looking forward to starting this first episode with you.
Yeah, it's going to be great. For those who don't know me, I'm a journalist / content creator, kind of somewhere in the middle. I work for a bunch of different websites, including here on Fanatics View. Just started there a couple weeks ago doing boxing, MMA interviews. So there's going to be a lot of combat sports talk in here. This isn't just an MMA show. We'll be covering some boxing as well. A lot of good stuff to talk about, and definitely be touching on the Tyson Jones thing, which happened on the weekend. But first, Kevin, little intro to you. You managed some pretty notable fighters, particularly Nick and Nate Diaz. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about your involvement in combat sports?
Yeah, man. So I manage boxers and I manage MMA fighters. Nick and Nate are some guys I work with. Gabe Rosado is another guy I work with. Tristan Calleruth, who's a top 25 prospect of 2019. I work with him too. He's over there at Golden Boy. And so I've been, in the fight business for a little while. Started off with Jean Pascal back in the days, and she's been working ever since, so it's just a beautiful sport, and I'm really excited to be here and to be able to share a lot of this knowledge, a lot of this game with a lot of our fans here. And Fanatic Views is obviously a company my friend Taylor, started off with, and then I've been on board with him for the last 4 or 5 years. So we've been doing this, so I've been handling management, but I've also been handling the media content.
And doing some great interviews, man. It's funny because we obviously had met for the first time, I think a week ago. We did a video call and we've never met in person or anything, but I definitely have seen your interviews before. So it was cool to go back and watch some of the stuff. And that's why I'm so excited about coming together. Cause sometimes when it's you get someone who's not used to doing interviews or anything, it's how's the chemistry going to be? But after that call last week, I'm super excited. And we're both Canadian. That's kind of cool too. So,
yeah, right.
Shout out to that. Shout out to the Great White North.
And we share a passion for the sport, right?
Absolutely.
For combat. So we see it as an art, and we enjoy breaking it down and really just spreading the knowledge to people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's get right into it, man. Mike Tyson, Roy Jones Jr. What a week to start this podcast after that event.
Yeah.
That was. Man, I got to tell you, I listen to sports talk radio in the car anytime I'm out doing anything. That's all everyone was talking about this weekend. This was huge. The UFC was nowhere near the radar of Tyson and Jones Jr. No offense to Anthony Smith, but it was the talk of the town. It ended up as a draw. Just your thoughts on the main event, because you know what, for two 50-year-olds, I thought it was pretty good. What did you think?
It was exciting. Exciting. I was excited from the beginning of the card all the way to the end, and the first 2 fights were actually really, really good fights. There was a 126er guys at 126 fighting, and the other one was at 135, I believe. But it was really good fights that we saw prior to that, and then the entertainment aspect of it, having all the artists come out and perform in between the fights, it kind of turned it into an actual, spectacle, an event, more than just a fight card. So it was exciting, and then once we got to the main event, prior to the main event, Jake Paul and Nate Robinson, that was a sight to see. It was exciting, people tuned in, people wanted to see it, and they lived up to the hype, in my opinion, because once we got to Mike and Roy Jones, then it was just great to see. It was good to see,
Yeah, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, because we'll get into obviously the Jake Paul stuff. There's a lot of critics saying it's bad for boxing. I'm not of that belief. I think it's good. You bring different eyeballs. You bring the tweener audience, the teens, the kids who have watched these guys on YouTube. Now you're watching boxing as well. I think it's good to get that extra exposure because, again, it just adds a little bit more. Like Jones and Tyson could have done this card on their own. I mean, people would still watch, but to have a Jake Paul on there who's someone that, whether you love him or hate him, you don't have to love him as a person. The guy creates good content. He's known for being on YouTube. This is what a celebrity is now. It's not like your actor back in the day. YouTube celebrities are real celebrities now. So I think, it's good to kind of mix this up. I mean, how many people watch KSI and Logan Paul? Like to see Jake Paul fight here against an NBA player, Nate Robinson, who I used to watch shooting buckets for the Knicks, right? It's interesting. I think there is an intrigue. And I also want to remind people that, when Fox used to do celebrity boxing, that's one of their highest rated shows of all time was the celebrity boxing. I remember when Joey Buttafuoco fought China. That I found this out after that had bigger numbers than any of the UFC cards that were ever on Fox. Like, think about that. There is an intrigue for this type of celebrity boxing and all that. By the way, if you guys have any questions, if you're watching this live, submit them in the YouTube chat. We will get to them as we're going along here. Kevin and I are going to be talking a lot, but we will get to your questions as soon as you can. So just post them in there. We'll post them on the screen. But yeah, what is your thoughts on sort of the YouTube, stars kind of mingling in with these legends?
Well, I'll tell you what. The first time we heard about this type of things happening was, I believe, about a year or two ago. Me and Taylor and Fanatic Views actually covered the first YouTube fighter to fight on a card. It was with DAZN and Eddie Hearn. And, we have a good relationship with Eddie Hearn and those guys over there. So, we had full access to that. And you were able to automatically see the numbers spike on YouTube all across the board anytime they were covering these guys, right? So you saw the effect. You saw the internet effect of what they could do. Now, it came down to, do they have the skill sets to be able to entertain, and would they respect the sport and fine-tune their craft to be able to perform? And, they're not fighting professional fighters, but they're training and they're training hard. One thing that people got to take into account is who was in Jake Paul's corner. BJ Flores was in his corner. That's a former cruiserweight titleist. He's a professional trainer. And I got a chance to really talk with him about a year ago while we were in Miami in February when Jake fought the other YouTube dude. It was with Devin Haney on that card. And we got to talk. I said, man, look, I said, these guys ain't good. I said, because I haven't seen them train. I haven't seen anything at that point. And he told me, Kevin, I'm telling you, man, this guy, he could go. He just needs to put in more hours and put in more time, but he could go. I'm like, all right. He's like, he'll definitely he said he'll beat the shit out of all these guys. I said, okay. I said, all right. So I got to see that. We got to see that fight. It was he beat a little guy. It was 30, 40 seconds. He beat him. It was nothing crazy. It was like one round. And then, but to see what he looked like then in February and to see what he looks like now, it's like I could see that he's been training. So that's a year and a half straight of training. Boxing and mixed martial arts, it's a rinse and repeat. You got to do it every single day to get good at it. And the more you do it, the better you get, so he put in the time, and I saw that this weekend.
And the advantage with Jake as well, aside from the fact that, he obviously has a lot of money being a YouTube celebrity. So he has money to go and get the type of training, and being in California, which is like a great place to be, right? Like, it's not like he's in Alaska trying to get boxing training. He's got, a lot of at his disposal as well. But on top of that, he's a young guy. This isn't like a CM Punk situation where he's leaving WWF or WWE, I should say, and coming over and he's in his, mid 30s. Like, at least, like you said, the improvements, that's not something you'd necessarily see. And I'm glad you brought that up about the improvements as well, because I actually it was entertaining. Like, when you watch, no offense to CM Punk, great guy, he's a big hockey fan too, don't want to talk too much smack, but I mean, here's a guy that, when you watch that fight, you're like, this doesn't belong in a UFC broadcast. But when you're watching that boxing fight with Nate Robinson and Jake Paul, I mean, I'm entertained. I don't know. Like, to me, it's different. It's a better recipe as opposed to getting some guys a little bit older. And that's why I do think this is going to be a thing. And I think it's going to be successful because they can get guys that are a little bit younger and maybe, that are out there. Like, even Logan Paul, like, he's not an old guy. He's young, right? So I think you can see those improvements, right?
These guys are young guys. They're 23, 24 years old. These guys are young guys. They're getting into the sport late, but, having youth on your side and also being able to have access to be able to get the right training and the right nutrition and the right to be able to, to get down in weight and to be able to, put the work in. This camp, I believe they did it in Vegas because BJ's gym is in Vegas. You get good sparring in Vegas, right? You get good sparring partners, and you cruiserweight, so he came in at 189 or something like that, and Nate came in at 183. And right away, I looked at Nate's corner, I said, who's that guy? I've never seen that guy in my life. Who's that trainer? Who's these guys? Who's he training with? Who's he sparring? And once I said, this is going to be a bad night, because it really comes down to, who's in your corner. When you got guys that are novice who've not been in the sport for a long time, they really are reliant on the advice from their corners and the people that's been in the sport to be able to guide them and teach them how to properly perform. And right away, I could see that, he has BJ in his corner, and I was like, no, go. But again, they did 1.2 million, for the card. And I feel like, the YouTube guys have a lot to do with that.
Big time.
Either way, it was going to sell, but I think that those guys generate numbers. And to be able to have a platform like Triller, who's also, that's TikTok before TikTok, essentially, be the one that put this on, connected the two worlds perfectly.
I completely agree. We got some questions coming in. We'll pop them up here on the screen. This is going to be cool for you, Kevin, because I don't think you've seen this before. But here we got our first question from Decon305. He says, should Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield do the trilogy? Do you think that would be just as good as Roy Jones and Tyson? That's honestly the first thing I thought of after this fight, because Holyfield came out with the tweet, and I'm thinking, like, there's a history there. There's a whole year thing. What do you think? You're more of a boxing guy than I am. Is that a fight you'd want to see?
Well, first of all, once the Mike Tyson rumor started, 4 months ago, Evander started training instead of posting videos of himself training.
That's right.
And getting ready.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, okay. He lit the fire. It doesn't take much to get these guys going. Boxers and mixed martial artists are fighters in general are guys that are, no matter how old they get, they've been training for so long and have done it for such a long period of time that mentally they believe that they could do it. All it takes is give them 4 or 5 months, 6 months to get ready, and they'll be ready. This is just how they think, so they think like that forever, so I see a guy determined to do it, but the body, it just comes down if their body would make it to the fight. You saw Mike trilogy. Okay, you saw Mike. Mike looked good. Mm-hmm. Mike looked good for a 54-year-old, for a 54-year-old, 53-year-old, he looked good, right? Like, but and Roy, Roy didn't look as good. He didn't look as good. But Roy's style, he needs to be able to be in really, really good shape to be able to fight that kind of style. It's a lot of movement to where Mike is everything's tight and compact, and it's burst. He's bursting. So and Roy didn't have enough to do what he needed to do. His mind was able, but his body was unable to follow him for 8 rounds at that kind of high level with that kind of style. So Evander and Mike, would that be as good? Sure. I mean, Evander's 56. Yeah, sure. I mean, it was so funny. We interviewed Evander Holyfield about a year and a half ago, and we asked him if he was in shape, and he always stays in shape. And his son is a fighter now. Evander's 58 actually. Yeah, so he's a bit older. So I mean, it'd be good to see. Shannon Briggs is another guy they bring up. Lennox Lewis is a name they brought up. Those would be interesting.
There's a lot of names out there, and I don't think Evander needs the money, by the way. I watched that. Have you ever seen that Back in the Game show with Alex Rodriguez? It's on MSNBC. It's a show where he basically takes like athletes that have retired and they've run into financial problems. Anyways, they did an episode with Evander. I watched it about a year ago, so it's interesting timing with all this. And apparently Evander was like in all these bad business deals. Did you know that he had like a fire hydrant, or not a fire hydrant, a fire extinguisher? He was like part of a brand for that, which had nothing to do with boxing. And so Alex Rodriguez, who like hosts the show, he's like, dude, what are you doing? Like, we got to get you something that like you're actually involved in. So by the sounds of it, I don't know what's happened since that episode, but it seemed like he got his finances in order. I don't think he was in deep trouble, but he was attached to a lot of just dumb stuff. And Alex Rodriguez kind of grilled him for it.
Well, we speaking of grill, he had a barbecue.
That too. That was the other
meat.
thing.
It was a meat company. Well, yeah, it was a meat barbecue company or something like that, and that's what he was promoting. While he was on his press tour or media obligations during our Super Bowl about 2 years ago, and that's where we really got to talk about the other side businesses that he has. He's an entrepreneur, so he created a bunch of businesses off of his brand and his name. So it's beautiful to see, because a lot of these older fighters don't get to do stuff like that. So it's beautiful to see.
It is. We got another question kind of related to the card. How long till CM Punk versus Jake Paul in MMA? I don't think they fight in MMA. There's no money there. You go in
there's no
boxing.
money there.
Look, the reason this boxing card worked is because these guys are doing it on their terms. They're the commodity. If they go into the UFC banner, the UFC is going to make it about them being the commodity, not the boxers. That's why the boxing model, UFC model is a little bit different. I think if they did fight, it would be outside of the UFC. Now, I don't know what CM Punk's contract status is. I think he can do whatever he wants. I know he's doing wrestling now. He's doing some commentating. I don't know if you have any insight to that, but I think if they did fight, it would have to be. And I don't think CM takes that fight. I mean, after everything that's happened.
So last summer, Logan Paul approached us. The Diaz brothers, who I work with, train also in LA. So we're in LA. We're located in LA in Stockton, California is where they train us, where the main gym and the headquarters at. And we run into Logan. We met Logan probably a year or two ago, a while back, and and he's like, "Yo, guys, I wanna start training mixed martial arts." And we were building a gym in LA last year, and he said, "Yo, I'd like to come to you guys. I saw you guys are building a gym. I see the logo up there. Can I come train with you guys?" And Nick was like, "Yeah, man, let's bring him in. Come, we told him he could come in one time or whatnot." And he sounded like he was really excited about doing it. And he hit me up. He's like, "Hey, you guys training or whatnot?" But we ended up leaving, going back to Stockton. We were on a different schedule. But so I see that there. I think that what's happened is they found a love for the sport, or just appreciation for the actual art, and they know that they can monetize off of it because it's an interesting thing to see them. People want to see fights, but these guys, they know that people want to see them lose, and they don't mind putting it on the line because they have confidence in themselves to be able to win those fights. CM Punk, I don't know if the demand is there to see him in mixed martial arts. I feel like that boat has sailed. Anything can happen in this kind of a world now that we live in,
Yeah, we'll see. Anything's possible, I think, at this point. That's crazy. We got another question kind of about Jake Paul. Does he beat Dylan Dennis in boxing? Here's my take on Dylan Dennis. He's with Bellator. I don't think Scott Coker lets him out and does like sort of a fun fight like that. Maybe he does, but I just think Dylan's a commodity for Bellator. People will tune in. He's not a huge commodity, but he's a guy that, talks a lot of trash. He's Conor McGregor's buddy. Like, I could see them just keeping him there, continuing to give him sort of tune-up fights as they've been doing. And I don't think you will see him go over there because Dylan's a jiu-jitsu guy. Why would he box Jake Paul? Good suggestion, by the way, but I don't see it happening. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't see that happening either. I don't see that happening. I mean, first of all, isn't he coming off an injury right now? I thought he just had an injury or surgery or whatnot. And I don't know, man. I've never seen him striking. He goes right to the ground when it comes to it. But I mean, he probably believes in his striking, or more specifically in his hands, because striking is feet and hands. But he probably believes in his hands enough to be able to go in there and try to do it. But again, what is he, like 160 pounds, 150 pounds?
I forget what weight class. I'm gonna look it up right now.
Jake is what, 185, 180, 189, 190. So
yeah, he's a bigger guy.
Weight. To be able to, where would they meet at? What weight would they meet at?
Well, looks like Dylan's a welterweight. Now here, what would he compete last?
170.
Yeah, it was 175. Of course, Bellator, the catchweight league, right? They do that all the time. Which I don't know.
So 185 is not that far off. Yeah, he could be. Yeah,
it could be potential. Okay, last thing on this card, we've talked a lot about it. Do you have to mention MMA Fight Picks? My buddy Aaron, shout out to Aaron, who runs the Ally Quinta Realty account, one of the best accounts on Twitter. If you aren't following that, highly recommend doing that. But he says, I don't like trilogies where someone's already lost twice, referring to Holyfield. You know what though, Aaron? I'll say this. Most fans, newer fans, I bet they don't even remember about Holyfield and Tyson unless you go back and watch it on YouTube. I remember it because I'm old enough where I remember the ear, bite and all that other stuff. But I think that's something people would still watch now because they didn't see it live. So I think there is an audience for it. So what do you think, Kevin?
I think that it depends on how they lost, right?
Yeah.
You look at like Manny Pacquiao and Marquez, right? I mean, you could argue that Marquez won one or two of those other fights. He lost on paper. It's Pacquiao had won two, and they had drawed one, and going into that fourth fight, Marquez knocks him out. So, but three of those fights prior to that fourth fight could have went to Marquez. At least two of them could have went to Marquez, especially the draw. So Yeah, but with Tyson and Holyfield, yeah, I mean, people would want to see it, so
Yeah.
that's what it is. They just want to see it. But I don't know. Do you think that's the best fight you can make for Mike after that? Do you think that's the best? What do you think?
I think it's going to depend on the name. I think Holyfield's a name. Lennox Lewis is a name. You got to get a name in there that Tyson could be, look okay again. Like he can't fight obviously like someone like new, right? I don't think there'd be any interest. I think you capitalize on the name the same way that Bellator did that with when they brought over the UFC heavyweights. You matched up like Amir and Roy Nelson or something, right? Like I think the same thing would apply here where Tyson's not going to fight nobody. He's got to fight someone with a decent name and someone that he's going to look like. Roy Jones was a good matchup. Roy was 51, I think, or something, right? So it's like one of those things where you kind of match those guys up and it made sense, but your options are limited.
How old is Shannon Briggs? How old is
Shannon Briggs is another name I would put up there. Shannon Briggs.
That'd be a good one. I think that.
What is he? He's got to be.
He's younger than Mike. He got to be 50.
48.
48. Okay.
Yeah, he's 48.
Yeah. He's younger than Mike, so I like that one. That's not bad. He stays around boxing. So that'd be good.
Shout out to Taylor, by the way, who suggested that in the private chat. Taylor is backstage. We're not going to bring him on today, but because I know he's a little shy. But once we get him on, it'll be all good, man. And shout out to him for making this happen because he's the one who connected us together. We got Decon 305 saying, "Love the show, subscribing to the channel and sharing it. Great so far. I like it." That's what we want to hear, people. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. We're going to be doing this every Wednesday. You're going to get stuff from us that you won't get from anyone else. I interview a ton of fighters. I got a lot of stories. Kevin's got a lot of stories. We've got a lot of insight. So that's something you're not going to get from your typical shows. We don't need to talk about those shows either.